Now I want to turn to Earl Hackett, who is doing a build along for Lambert Locomotive Works of one of their new products. It's a commuter coach. So, Earl, welcome.
Um, this was the model was designed by Lambert Locomotive Works. It was printed by 3DP Trains, and I've had the privilege of building this thing. It came out. It turned out to be a beautiful model. Now I'm a CNO modeler, and the CNO never offered commuter service anywhere on their line. So I called up the CNO historical group and I said, "Hey, what can I do with this thing?" And they said, "Oh, well, they had what they called employee cars, and because they ran through such uh, inaccessible territory, they had a train that went around in the morning and picked up employees from various towns, brought them into the depot, and took them home at night. And they used commuter coaches, and this is one of them. And when I went and looked in my looked up all the diagrams I have of these things, these employee cars, they had torn out all the seats and put in benches, just longitudinal benches. But you can see that this one has seats in it. You can see them all along there. So I said, that's going to be the prototype. That's what I'm going to build it for. So this is what we wound up with. Now the roof is different, but I don't care. It's close enough for me. And I thought it came out. There was some problems with it, but it came out. I think it came out just fine. The first attempt was the problem. This was originally built as an O scale model, and they just shrunk it down to HO scale. And when you do that, as I mentioned in one of my presentations on 3D printing, you can wind up making it too thin, and things can fail. That's what happened here. This section here got thinned out so much that it warped. So we had to do it over again. And what I got back was this, and this was a very, very nice print. Great rivet detail. The one thing I found surprising about it, they were using a resin that is so flexible, it's almost like rubber. And I was wondering how that was going to work out, but it worked out quite well. I had my doubts, to tell you the truth, in the first beginning. Here you can see the rivet detail. It's really excellent. The other things that are in the box, they include trucks. Then you have a whole bunch of seats, some doors, and for there's several designs that he worked around. Some for New York Central, some for Pensy, some for others, but they all had slightly different end configurations. And he supplies the parts to make any one of the configurations you want to model. The one part that we didn't redo, and maybe we should have. This was the floor, and you can see that it's warped somewhat, but it was so flexible. I figured, well, we'll be able to use this. I could just bend it up there and glue it in place, and it'll work just fine. So we didn't replace that one. These are the trucks. Excellent detail on these things, and they're pretty darn flat. This one here was slightly out of kilter, and that the wheel isn't quite touching the rail. But when you put the car on it, it's plenty of weight to squash it down. It'll work just fine. They recommended using the KD wheel sets. I found those to not really be very free rolling, so I put in Intermountain wheel sets, and they work just fine. Tools, you don't need many. This is really not much more difficult than the old shake a box kit from Atherm years and years ago. One tool that I use a scalpel, some nippers, and this guy here is a dental drill. This thing is a lifesaver when I'm building models. I just have some sanding disc in there right now, but you'll see how I use it for doing the grab rail, so why it's so nice for that later on. Well, next week. One of the things I I built is I use a lot of sanding discs, and to remove them, I took an old compass, ink compass, cut off one of the edges, and sharpen this point up nice and sharp. Now you, one or two spins around and you have yourself a fresh sanding disc of whatever grade of whatever grit you want. And this has turned out to be a real handy little device that I've used pretty much on every model I work with. And I'll say something about adhesives. I'm not a big fan of CA glues, but this DAP Rapid Fuse seems to be a really nice product. It's a thickened liquid, and it stores pretty well. I had one that's a year old, and it was still perfectly good. I hadn't still usable. This one here is a very liquidy one. I just picked up this at the hardware store because I needed a real one that could wick into cracks and crevices. But Welder is one of my favorite adhesives. It's sort of like Walther's glue on steroids. It once it sets up, boy, it's really strong. So parts, you have to prepare the parts. One of the problems you have in 3D printing is you have supports. And the supports are little things that support, well, they provide support for the resin as it's being cured, as it's printing. But you pull them off, they leave all these little dimples all over the place. And so you have to get rid of them. And the other thing you have to work on, you have to go over and look for any supports like these, right? These will be hiding in here, here, and here, and you may not notice them until you paint it, and then it's too late. So you go over very, very carefully looking for any of these supports that are or waiting to be tripped up. And you just take the little nippers and clip, and they're gone. Little, maybe a touch up with the scalpel and remove them. This stuff is so flexible. You could easily carve it with a scalpel. And that was, and I had to in a couple spots. So once you get ready to go, you take all your seats and you're gonna paint everything first. And in this case, I wanted to keep the bonding surfaces clean, and so I clamped them between a couple of pieces of wood, and they were on my downdraft table here. And I just picked a can of green Krylon, that nice color, so have green seats, and sprayed the whole business up in 2 shots. But holding them this way keeps the little bottom parts clean without any paint on them, so you get a good bond. Now, if you're going to, if you get parts that are still mounted, here you can see the supports. They're holding the parts. You can glue these things. You pop these off the build plate, and you can glue them down on some painter's tape and spray them that way. And that's actually easier to handle than the other. Now, one thing that we did run into, as I said, these first parts, these were reduced from O scale, and the little handles didn't come out very well. So we redid those, but I didn't have time to wait for that. So I did a quick job of printing up some seats. These are more like a regular coach seat than a commuter seat. And I use these. But the coach seats you get in the kit, these are the ones he sent me. I got them just 2 weeks ago. He even put in a padded armrest here. So these are HO scale and really nicely done. You have a couple of little discs here to set the height above the floor so that they don't, they'll all come out at exactly the same height. So these are the ones that are being supplied with the kit. Seat installation is pretty straightforward. I just took I had to, these holes all plugged up a little bit from printing, and that sort of surprised me because these are big holes, and I've not had a problem with holes plugging up in my printers, but anyway, they plugged up, and it took all of 2 minutes with a number 55 drill to just go through and clean them out so that they were you could put the seats in them. I just masked off the steps here. They'll be painted later black, but this was just spray painted with a brown primer of some sort. Again, Krylon or well, what's the other one? Yeah, the other one of the other guys. But so I sanded off all the knobs, little bumps and stuff, and spray painted it. This will be the hole for the screw for holding the trucks on. And so the seats are installed, and Well, for installation, what I did for these installation, I put a puddle of goo. I mean, my welder out on on a piece of paper, and I just dipped the seat in the welder, stick them in the hole, dip it in the welder, stick it in the hole, and they were all mounted in a matter of about 10 minutes. So it was very so far. It's a very easy installation. There's some problems later on, which we'll get into, but they're easy to circumvent. But the kit went together very easily, and I was surprised how well this really soft material behaves when you're working with it. So that's all until next week. When we have part two. And anybody have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I'd like to say thank you, Earl,
Oh, you're welcome.
from your friends at Lambert Locomotive Works.
Yeah. No, that is it turned out to be well. I'll have a better picture of the finished model later on, but it turned out just beautifully.
Right.
It was I was when I first when Jim first asked me to do this, I said, "What am I going to do with this thing? I don't. They don't have any commuter stuff." But
I remember when you and some of the stuff that Earl, like when we first ran into the issues, I think at that point I had made like 20 or 30 of these coaches, and Earl was the person who ran into the problems. So go figure. I'm like, okay. I actually reached, there was the frame. It's like, okay, we know the frame did that. And we're
yeah,
like, okay, great. The ends warping the way they did, we're like, what in the world happened here? There was one other issue. Now, on some of the earlier kits, you'll notice there's like a grill in the ventilators. And Earl, when he got his, it's like, hey, there's resin all over the sides of it. And I'm like, what in the world? So I had a prototype here. I'm going through the CAD file. I'm looking at the prototype. The ventilators behind the grill was hollow. Now, I never, on the O scale cars, when I got those, it was never an issue because it was large enough you could easily clean it out. So when the printers processed it, they came out great. I reached out to the people who bought them, and I had one person come back say they had resin like what Earl saw. They're like, it came off with rubbing alcohol, so I didn't think to tell you anything. And I'm like, well, can someone say it, please? Nothing personal. This is the type of thing I like finding beforehand. So the version Earl has is the ventilator solid to basically eliminate a place that resin could hide, that it could run down the side of the model or get stuck in the packaging.
yeah.
So that's good. The ends, those joints all got thickened up. I did add a little bit of thickness to the frame. Not much, but enough to help it a little bit more. And of course we saw the seats. Now, keep in mind, this is all scaled down from O. We did tweak the wall thicknesses after Earl ran into the issues because we're like, okay, obviously if one person's going to run into it, could be others. Let's fix it so we don't have to deal with it. So that's good. And even the seat pegs, that was based on Earl's feedback. I did tweak up the arms a little bit. Now, keep in mind, these seats are not prototypical. The seat design originated with an engineer's seat that I widened into a flip over bench, it was based off an O scale brass part because I couldn't find good scale drawings of the seats that Usgood Bradley built. So this helped. And I even noticed your picture of that employee car. Did you notice it's the same trucks under it too, Earl? Because I picked up on that.
Yeah.
Even the I'm glad that it's working out well. And so far, like I said, if Earl, I have no problem with. I want to know the issues. If there's someone who's run into a problem other than Earl, tell me. Then I can make sure we fix it. Because if there's something else that I missed that say hasn't come up before, let's make sure. I want to make sure that you're getting a good model. Period. It's my name on the box.
Yeah, and it came out. It's coming out beautifully. I've got it pretty much. Don't have it really completed. I generally don't build the underbody. I don't bother with that. You can't see it. I don't build it, but you can see the brake rods coming down. So I'm probably going to flip it over and put those on.
Yeah. So when I did the O scale ones, I did with brass tubing because it was basically one piece. You could just slip a piece of tubing over the stubs. It's a little bit smaller in your size, so I found that wire works better.
Yeah, I have spring steel wire that I use.
It's actually what I've been using for my brake piping because it doesn't deform easily. When I was messing with the brass on my prototypes, I'm like, I don't like how easily this dents.
Yeah.
So, but no, it does look good. And I appreciate it, Earl.
Yeah, it's really came out good. What do you see how you'll be interested how I did the grab irons.
Yeah, no, that I want to see because now I might have to go buy one of those drills. I might have to buy one.
All righty. Very good.